Well, it's Christmas time once again. Or at least it was when I started filming this video. As you'll soon see, this was a bit of a journey. But before we get to that stuff, yay Christmas! There's a bit of a precedent for me when it comes to gift-giving occasions for my wife. I like to go really big. Not just because she's a beautiful, supportive, intelligent angel who absolutely deserves it, but also because she is unfathomably out of my league, and I'm terrified that one day she's going to realize it. Last year, for Christmas, I got her a full 88-key digital piano, because she always grew up with a piano in her home and loves to play, but hasn't had one since we moved in together. For Mother's Day, a few years ago, I got her some very nice Bose noise-canceling headphones, because kids. For her 24th birthday, I got her pit tickets to see Katy Perry, a decision that backfired when I had to go to a Katy Perry concert. All this is to say, again, precedent. Now, she can tell me as many times as she wants that what she really wants is more Barnes & Noble gift cards, but I know better than to fall for that. But this year I had a problem. See, we are, very fortunately, at a point in our lives where even beyond having everything we need, we also have pretty much everything we want. We've got all the electronics we care to have, all of the comfy furniture, all of the flyest fashions. There's just nothing obviously lacking in our material lives. Fortunately for me, our corporate overlords have a store for people like us. That's right, the Sharper Image. That repository of cheaply made gadgets that are just novel enough to capture your imagination with promises of heretofore unknown conveniences, yet clearly pointless enough that you never really consider actually buying one. I always flip through this catalog when it comes to my house. If nothing else, it gives me ideas for things of actual value and utility that I could buy. But this year, as I was flipping through, I saw something that did catch my eye. A towel warmer. Suddenly I was taken by the image of my wife reluctantly stepping out of a nice warm shower on a cold winter day, only to be greeted by the luxurious embrace of a nice toasty robe. In lieu of any ideas of actual merit, I decided she needed one. Now, this is where our journey begins in earnest, because as I'm looking at this simple plastic box that has just a fan and heating element inside and somehow costs $120, I had the thought, innocently enough at first, I could just build one of those myself. And then, from that point on, I had to. I was compelled. Could I make it cheaper? Probably not. Could I make it safer? Definitely not. But could I make it better? Also no. But an unfortunately common side effect of being an engineer is realizing you can do a thing and then not being able to not do that thing. Like that time my friend installed a full sink in his chicken coop to avoid a simple chore of bringing them water. Now, with the pandemic going on, it kept the main illness bringers in our home away from their favorite sources of infection, so I actually had a healthy bank of sick days to use at the end of the year. So I had time to kill, and handmade gifts are especially meaningful, right? I mean, that's what people say. I mean, I'm sure when she sees how much time and energy I put into this, it'll mean more than anything I could buy ever could, right? Look, I wanted to make a thing, okay? Now, before we get started, I want to be very explicit about something. Now, the point of my videos is to show that you don't necessarily need an exceptional amount of time or money or specialized tools or experience or basic competence to craft things yourself. You know, not everyone can be the hacksmith, guys. That being said, please do not watch this video and take it as license to shove anything that gets hot into a box and call it a day. I am not an electrical engineer, but I do actually have years of experience designing and building small appliances and have a pretty good understanding of the features that are designed into these kind of things to keep them from burning down your home. So please, listen to my good friend Tony'll here, and don't try this at home. Now, with that out of the way, let's get to building. Again, I'm not an electrical engineer, And while I have a couple of days to do the actual building, I don't have time to research and order components for this before Christmas Day. So I decided to take the advice of an old college professor of mine who once told me, the best engineers are blatant thieves. And I just bought a hairdryer to gut for the electrical components. Now, it's not as sexy a build if I start off with this, but one, it's a commercial appliance, so it almost certainly has the thermal cutoffs and extensive safety testing necessary to give me confidence that it won't catch fire. Two, it saves me weeks of research and component procurement. And three, I'm doing the best I can here, people. Now, normally I start with design work, but given that I have this pre-existing assembly I'm going to be building around, I really want to dig in and figure out what I'm working with there before I go designing the enclosure it's going to fit in. Otherwise, I'm going to spend a lot more time and money than necessary trying to hack together this shoddy framework around this inflexible centerpiece I never took the time to explore. Kind of like Zack Snyder desperately trying to fit a movie around the premise that Batman and Superman should fight. So the first thing I do is open up the housing and strip out all the electrical components. I then throw everything else back into the box. The only plastic parts I wound up keeping were the plastic cone that goes around the fan blades and the portion of the housing that goes around the heating coil. The idea here being that these components are already designed to maximize airflow through the unit and withstand the heat generated by the coils. So keeping both of these keeps all these components as close to their as-designed case as possible, which minimizes the risk of me either bricking this thing or, worse, starting a fire. Now, once I've actually got it apart, I am sure to take a few moments to look over what sort of fail-safes were designed into it, and also just kind of appreciate how the motor works, because I've always thought brush DC motors are pretty cool. If any of that sounds appealing to you, or if you're just curious about why hairdryers don't catch fire, go ahead and click that link in the top right-hand corner of your screen. It should be, I don't know, right about here-ish. Anyway, now that I know what I'm working with, I can sit down and do the actual design work to build the box around it. All right, so I've got a very rough design here. Normally I would take some time to do some nicer pictures, but I am on a time crunch. So this is sort of a cross-section view of what I imagine is going to be. So I'm wanting to mount the hairdryer parts, and I've decided I'm going to keep the front of the casing, I think, to help further funnel the air. So I'm going to have this channel here that goes down and up top. Now, these little things, these are holes that I'm going to drill into these boards so that the hot air goes from this chamber and then into the area where we've stuffed, you know, a robe, a towel, whatever thing you want to make warm. Obviously, this whole setup, this hairdryer here, is designed to have constant free passage of air through it. So if we are restricting the airflow through here too much, this might get hot enough that non-resettable thermal cutoff cuts off, and then we're dead in the water. So my plan is by having holes in the bottom and up top, there should always be some unencumbered holes so that we get some free flow of air through here. Really, we're just trying to create a pocket of warm air here more than we are trying to actually force that air through the garment. So my approach is going to be more holes, not fewer. Then we're going to have a lid up here that can hinge up and down. So this was a little bit more of a detailed 3D sketch that I think gets the concept across a little more clearly. So I'm actually going to use this to dimension out my pieces of wood. You can see I've started here to sort of overlay the areas, but this is not finished, but this is close enough, I think, for me to actually cut wood. With the design locked down, I can figure out exactly how big I need each of these wood pieces to be, and then I start marking and cutting wood. If you watched any of my other videos up to this point, you've seen how this process goes. I take my giant square and a tape measure, and I lay out all the pieces on my raw wood. Once I have the pencil lines down, it's time to start cutting. Again, just doing simple rectangles, so. Now, because I don't have actual carpentry tools like a table saw or something, all of these cuts are freehand. So all the parts that are supposed to be the same width don't match up exactly. So I take my sander with the roughest grit sandpaper I have, and I do a few passes to try and smooth out as many of those mismatches as I possibly can. Once that's done, I take another lesson from the DC Extended Universe, and I make sure these pieces all actually fit together before I go cramming them in the same space. All right, so I've got my first pass at a basic sort of fit check for all of my pieces. This is sort of a cross section, and it seems like everything's fitting pretty nicely. I mean, obviously, not everything is held together yet. It's just kind of bounced together on those various edges, but you can kind of see what I'm going for here. Obviously, the top pieces aren't on here, but the fact that this all fits together nicely is very encouraging. Now that I know the pieces fit, it's time for me to start working on the part level details. I take the back piece and I lay out exactly where the hairdryer inlet is going to sit. With that area marked, I need to cut a through hole. But how am I going to cut a nice circular through hole in this piece of wood this size? I mean, it's too big for a drill bit. Well, enter my new friend, my Dremel router attachment. I've never used it before, but I've used big industrial end mills, and this is basically just a smaller version. I mean, how hard could it be? That is not a circle. Well, okay, so my tendency to jump right into using a new tool without literally any practice has backfired once again. God, if only there was some way to see this coming every single time. I need to regroup. Trying to do this circle freehand with nothing more than pencil lines to guide me is hard enough, but add in the fact that the bit is actually burning the wood when I try and take off more than a millimeter of depth at a time, you get an approach that both isn't effective and takes forever. So, really, really killing it on this one. But unlike Warner Brothers, who decided to follow up the grimdark and convoluted Batman vs. Superman with Justice League, I decided to take a new approach. Rather than trying to remove all of this material with my router, I'm going to see how much material I can remove with my other tools first. I start out by drilling as many holes as I can fit into that ring of material I've already removed. Then I take my oscillating cutter and I cut between those holes to remove as much of that central mass of wood as possible. With that out of the way, I go back to my router. Now I'm still doing this freehand, but with most of the material already removed, I'm able to get much more regular cuts. Now, more regular still doesn't mean circular, as I discovered when I did a fit check with the part of the dryer that needs to fit through this hole. Thankfully, my first pass at this circle was intentionally undersized, so I'm able to draw a larger pencil circle to use as a new guide. This both shows how far off I was in my first attempt, and gives me a second chance at making it work. A few more careful passes with the Dremel, and I get something that fits really, really acceptably. And this, dear viewer, is where it hit the fan. See, my Christmas gift to myself this year was to finally replace my almost decade-old laptop with a high-end gaming desktop. And I actually got it set up while I was in the process of building this towel warmer. So on day 2, when I did most of the actual construction of the box, I took all the footage I had shot that day and moved it directly from my phone right onto the new machine, so that I would have room on my phone to shoot the last little bit of video on day 3. And then the f***ing bricked on me. It would not turn on at all. The copious rainbow LEDs all came on, as did all of the fans, but no power ever went to the keyboard or monitor. And after about 30 seconds, the whole thing would click off and try to come back on again, getting stuck in this sort of infinite power loop cycle until I mercy killed it by hitting the hard switch on the back of the machine. I am not an expert in computer hardware, but ample Googling told me I was either looking at a corrupt Windows install, a faulty power supply, or something died on the motherboard. Now, after trying a few things that the internet told me to try, I was actually able to get the machine to boot into safe mode, so I figured it was probably the Windows install. So I bit the bullet and did a fresh install of Windows, sacrificing all of my day 2 footage in an attempt to actually get a working machine. What's worse is that this didn't even fix the problem. So, now being woefully out of my depths, I called my good friends at Cybertron PC, who kindly offered to replace the machine for me. Here I am now, editing the video on the replacement. I really can't say enough good things about Cybertron's customer service. I called them at like lunchtime on Christmas Day, and I got an actual human being who answered the phone and was helpful and friendly and knowledgeable and got things rolling for me immediately. They built my new machine while the old one was still in transit. They gave me a free upgrade to my RAM. So again, I can't say enough good things about the customer service. So if you're looking for a new PC, check them out. Anyway, here's a list of all the things I did on day 2 that I do not have footage for. Yeah, it's a lot. There was actually some things that I thought were particularly clever. Like when I wanted to put the sides on the assembly, I actually taped the internal pieces into their proper locations, and then I used a pencil and some paper to take a rubbing of those edges. And then because those edges shared a corner with the side, when I dropped the side on, I was able to tape that piece of paper onto the side, and it showed me exactly where the wood I needed to drill into was for my through holes. So, I thought that was pretty clever. Also, I kind of figured out how to use the router. I used it to drill a narrow channel through a couple of pieces that was just the right width for the power cord for the hairdryer to fit through, and I routed some nice pockets for the hinges that held the lid on to sit in, so the lid would actually sit flush with the rest of the assembly. Really, it was the bulk of the actual construction. So, I don't know, maybe this one should be titled Jacob Makes a Lost Video. Well, jumping back into the footage I do have, after I had put the hinges into the pockets I made with my router and screwed them onto the main body, I had to find a way to attach the lid. To do this, I took the screws that go into the lid and I inserted them into the top portion of the hinges, tips up. Then I took the lid and I put it in its proper location relative to the rest of the assembly, and I pushed it down onto these screws, driving the tips into the wood. This left behind little marks showing exactly where these screws needed to go. So, awkwardly kind of holding the part in as close to the right position with one hand as I could, I took my ratcheting screwdriver and I drove the screws into those locations. And with that, I completed the final assembly. Now, because all of my cuts were freehand, there are some mismatches in this assembly. For the more severe cases, I take my oscillating cutter with a flush cutting attachment and I cut away any overhang. For everything else, I just sanded until the joint was smooth to the touch. Once I have an almost uniform edge around the top, I decided to get a little fancy and cut a decorative edge into it. Why put a decorative edge on a box that was clearly made by an amateur working on a compressed timeline? Well, I had my fancy new router attachment and all of these decorative edge bits I'd never gotten a chance to use before, and yeah, maybe it's polishing a turd, but again, once I realize I can do a thing, I have to do the thing. So I try it, and it actually turns out pretty nice. A couple of burns here and there where I'm cutting a little too quickly, but really not bad for a first attempt. Once I have that decorative edge on, I then lightly sand all 4 vertical edges of the box, because small children. And then I take the finest grit sandpaper I have, and I hit all of the other exterior faces, just to polish it up as much as possible.
All right, so we've gone and done some finishing passes with our sander. The wood's nice and smooth. Got this nice finished edge on top. Just a couple of unfortunate scorch marks. But mechanically, it's done. So now we're going to stain it. But first, as you can see, the whole place is just a mess. I can't stain with all this dust around. So I'm going to clean up first. And it's clean.
With everything shop vac, I'm ready to stain and seal the assembly. Now, dark blue may not be a common pick for a wood stain, but this way it'll match my bathroom cabinets. Once everything's dry, I then hit it again with my sander just to make sure I'm clearing away any particulates that might have gotten stuck to the box while the stain was wet. And once it's again smooth to the touch, I'm ready to apply my 100% transparent sealant. I know it's completely clear because it says transparent in big bold letters right on the side of the can.
All right, so this transparent sealant that I bought, I just realized, Canyon Brown. I'm not sure how it's supposed to be transparent when it looks like that. So, I will not be using this, which means it's as done as it's gonna get.
Okay, so lesson learned. Don't buy this stuff in a rush and assume that just because the biggest word on the can is transparent, that it's the thing I want. Honestly, this one's on me. So, with no sealant to apply, this build comes to an unexpected and early end. And all that's left is the gifting. I take the box my soon-to-be busted PC came in and stuff the warmer into it, because that exterior power cord would have made wrapping this otherwise a nightmare. It's actually great for me that I kept the computer box for this purpose, because a few days after Christmas, I'd be using it again to ship a PC halfway across the country. So, with the box more or less secure, I take some very choice wrapping paper and make it nice and presentable. Presentable. Yeah, you get it. And that's a wrap. Finally, the moment arrived for us to finally exchange gifts. Now, I'm going to preface what you're about to see with the context that, despite my best efforts, Lindsay did figure out that the thing that I was building in the garage was a gift for her, and then spent every waking hour between that moment and our gift exchange trying to guess what it was I could have possibly made for her. Predictably, she came up with several much better ideas than a towel warmer, so she set herself up for disappointment.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
It's Christmas Eve,
Yeah.
but it's easier for us to exchange gifts when the kids are asleep. So, I want you to go ahead and open your gift.
Oh gosh, I have so much anxiety.
I wrapped it for some reason. You're going to open it and you're not going to know what it is.
So you've said. And you wrapped it in superhero stuff. So is it really for you?
No.
Some kind of good thing to use your computer box for.
Mm-hmm.
That was his Christmas present, which arrived last week. So, nothing exciting for him. It's blue. Which I've known because you've had blue fingers.
Yeah. So what you're looking at is actually the back of it.
The back. Okay. Is it some sort of fancy shelf for your projector?
Mm-mm. That would not be a gift for you.
Okay, I don't want to turn this like upside down. It's a cardboard box with something blue in it. And it's never
Merry
coming
Christmas.
out. Okay, so the plug is back here. It looks like a hairdryer plug because it's got the like little reset button on it.
How perceptive of you.
Okay, so then what do I do? Do I open it?
Yeah.
Where does it open? The top.
It's a towel warmer.
A towel warmer?
Yeah, or you can put your robe in it.
Oh, well that's nice.
Yeah. So you just throw whatever you want to be warm in it when you get in the shower and you turn it on, and by the time you're out of your shower, everything inside is nice and toasty.
So is there a hairdryer in the bottom of this?
Yes, I cannibalized a hairdryer for the fan and heating element.
Not mine upstairs.
No, I bought one.
Okay. Very cool. I think this will be more useful for warming a towel for Lucy than for me.
You think?
I don't know. She's upset more about being cold after a shower than I am.
I guess.
But thank you.
You're welcome. I figured on cold days it'd be nice to throw your robe in there.
Yeah.
Be all nice and toasty.
Do you have to like fold it or you can just like...
You can just throw it in there.
Can you put more than one in there?
Yeah, I mean, I only tested it with one towel, but I imagine you could put as much as will fit in there.
All right. How long does it take to warm something up?
About 10 to 20 minutes, depending on how hot you want it.
So it just blows hot air into it, basically?
Mm-hmm. Just fills that little cavity with warm air.
So it's like our dryer,
Yeah,
basically.
but there's no tumble function.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I told you were going to be underwhelmed.
Yeah, a little bit. Thank you.
You're welcome. I worked very hard on it. Probably way harder than it made sense to work on it.
Was there a reason, like, you made it so tall in particular? Or...
I wanted it to be able to fit a lot.
So if you put more than one in there, or like a really big towel or something?
Yeah. I wanted it to be able to handle a really big fluffy robe.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Make it nice and warm.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, if you're on my YouTube channel, odds are pretty good you know my wife personally. But on the off chance you don't, this is 100% her polite disappointment reaction that you're seeing in that video. To her credit, she did politely use the thing half a dozen times as a blanket warmer before it just became an inert side table next to our couch. But as she predicted, it's mostly been used as a towel warmer for our skinny 2-year-old who shakes like a shaved lapdog when she gets out of a bath. So this one was a miss in a lot of ways. I only had about 20 hours to build, so a lot of the features I originally envisioned for this got left by the wayside. I didn't have time to surface mount the controls for the hairdryer on the side of the machine, so it's just permanently stuck on high heat and max fan speed with the controls kind of tucked inside the assembly. I didn't have time to individually stain and seal each piece before assembling the warmer, so there are a few places on this where you can see little slivers of unstained wood at the joints. I bought the wrong sealant, and the hardware store was closed by the time I realized, and it was my last possible day to build, so the thing was stained, but not sealed. I didn't cut a groove into the lid to both provide an easy finger hold for lifting the lid and also allow additional airflow through the warmer just to keep things flowing. But side note, the whole assembly is actually kind of leaky enough that I don't think airflow is a problem. And to top it all off, the recipient spent so much time thinking of other things she wished she had that disappointment became inevitable. But you know what? I still made a thing, and that thing works. And it's way too easy when you're crafting to get hung up on all the things that went wrong. If you take one thing away from my videos, I hope it's that things can go really, really sideways, and you can still end up with something kinda cool that actually works. You know, you don't have to be an expert or have an exceptional amount of time or resources to make things. You just have to decide to do it and accept that the things you make might kinda suck. But kinda sucking is the first step to not sucking, which eventually leads to actually being pretty good. So, until next time, keep wildly missing the mark, but celebrating the little victories along the way. Happy crafting, Internet.